Would you look at that, top 10 Kirby bosses of all things is my most popular video. So I guess it's about time that I came back to this in order to milk the topic. Wait, did I just say milk? Oh, well, I guess this script is tainted. Okay, in all seriousness, for reveal this time, Kirby is known for having consistently good quality. Except for whenever it comes to the boss fights. Unfortunately, some of the bosses can either be lacking immensely or just downright not fun at all. Thankfully, what is fun is making fun of them. So in order to make up for the fact that this is only 5 entries instead of 10, I'm going to set a rule for the sake of variety. I'm going to make it where I can only put one boss per game on here. So anyway, Kirby, he's the star of the show. Kirby, these bosses really blow. So before we jump into anything super negative here, I just want to express how I love how Kirby Star Allies handled boss fights. You see, this game is really easy. Like, it's easier than walking, which unfortunately means babies can't play this game, but that's beside the point. They upped the scale of the boss fights to make them look more grand, and it definitely works for something like King Dedede and Pawn and Con. And that makes Francesca, Flamberge, and Zan Partisan stick out like sore thumbs. Unlike all the other bosses, I don't enjoy these three. They disappoint me immensely. Unlike all the other bosses and Star Allies, these three feel like enemies with massive HP bars. So what can they do? They can swing their weapons, they can stab. I like Flamberge's attack, that's cool. They have special weapons that they bring out after they get to half health. That's about it. And I can definitely confirm that by Star Allies standards, this is still really freaking easy. Because even if you have fun avoiding those attacks, even if you like seeing them attack like that, you enjoy the music, you'll take them down in less than 30 seconds each. Heck, even during the V-matches against them, they use special weapons that you can counter. On one hand, that is cool and all, but on the other hand, that just makes them easier. I can't tell you how many times I've played through the Ultimate Choice, a boss rush mode, gotten to Zan Partisan, and taken down half her health before her HP bar even loaded in. I probably would have swapped these three out for someone else, but there's one more thing contributing to this. These are the allies of the main villain, and in comparison to the evil assistants of the past, Susie and Taranza, they have much worse boss fights. They were multi-phase, they had unique attacks, they were more memorable. And this trio of losers is what we get for Star Allies. Man, that was a trade-off. The only memorable thing about them is the fact that Francesca and Flamberge are implied to be gay. What? Oh, you wanted me to make a joke out of that? Well, I'm not going to. I'm a lot more sophisticated than that.
So long, Bowser!
You know, Kirby as a series is very consistent with its quality, and that can also be said for its final bosses. If I wanted to, I could even make a list of my favorite final bosses, but we'll set that aside for the time being. However, consistency doesn't last forever. I'm looking at you, Dark Nebula. Alright, look, this had a great setup. Well, that's unless if you consider that this thing was unleashed because it was mistaken for cake. Go right ahead, fire those old memes from yesteryear at me. Dark Nebula getting mistaken for cake is actually quite fitting, since his fight is a piece of cake. Fine, there's some alright concepts here. He uses elemental attacks, yada yada yada, but you throw that out of the window the moment you see that he can be easily defeated. And not to mention, this final boss fight only has one phase where you fight Dark Nebula. Say what you will about older Kirby final bosses, but they still had better climaxes than this. Dark Mind, from the game before this, had 4 phases. I decided to put Dark Nebula higher than the Elemental Mages, cause if you fail to deliver with your final boss fight, I feel that's a much bigger screw up. When you really think about it, it wouldn't have made much of a difference if there was just cake in the chest. The game's climax would be lackluster and forgettable either way. Gimmicks are really stupid. That's all I have to say, and you already agree with me. Kirby Triple Deluxe thought that since it was on the 3DS that they needed to incorporate background and foreground swapping. It's so revolutionary. Except for the parts whenever it completely falls flat on its face. Out of every boss in this series, Pyribit is the most hated of them all. And despite not being at number 1, I can wholeheartedly agree with everyone. So before we dive into anything absolutely disgusting here, let's go ahead and cover some of the basic stuff. First things first, his attacks are very annoying to dodge, such as whenever he's bouncing all over the place. Can you stop? And the fact that, oh, who am I kidding? I can't hold back any longer. The real reason everyone hates this fight so much is because he takes hippity hoppity get off my property to a new meaning. And by that, I mean he hippity hoppities off his own property. I guess capital B gave him too much to drink or something. Pyribit spends half of eternity in the background just waiting. And waiting. Well, that's if you consider waiting the same thing as completely wasting your time. And whenever he finally gets into the foreground, he won't stay there for long. And if he does stay there for an extended period of time, you're going to get hit by one of his attacks. Gimmicks can be potentially fun. They can add more to the game, but this isn't how you do it. Earlier points in Triple Deluxe showed how you can do this just fine. The other bosses don't spend 12 years in the background. They go back there for 1 or 2 attacks and leave it at that. That death animation for it is so satisfying. This frog's boss fight was built entirely around one gimmick. No wonder things like this aren't well accepted into the gaming community. For the sake of variety, I stepped outside of the infamous bosses and decided to go with a few that people wouldn't otherwise cover. The Mage Generals are a good example of this, but most people would simply brush them aside. But I'd like to think most of you know about Landia. You know, that great boss that I really should have put on that other list. Except we're not talking about Landia. We're talking about its ugly-faced counterpart, Parallel Landia. He originates from Team Kirby Clash Deluxe, a compilation of Kirby bosses in an RPG style. But this is a free-to-play game. So that means that you gotta grind the money out of the people by making things unnecessarily frustrating. Parallel Landia is just Landia, except it's faster and it hits much harder. Look at that damage output. That does so much damage that Phil Swift would blush at the sight of that. And sure, you can say, oh, well, it's meant to be hard so that they'll get you to pay for gem apples. I'm gonna go ahead and ignore that, since I don't excuse bad design just because people wanted money. Much like how you should ignore that I forced an unrelated meme into my video. Here's what hurts me most with this. They've shown that they can create brand new bosses for Team Kirby Clash Deluxe. So why didn't they do that in this case? Why did they feel to take an already good boss and then ruin it by scaling up its difficulty to an unfair level? Being lazy really shouldn't be an excuse. It just makes your game look even worse. These last couple of entries have been a special kind of bad, but trust me, this is much worse than anything else. This boss, while not being as infamous as Pyribit, has its own level of infamy. I kid you not, for the longest time, this was my least favorite boss in general, not just in Kirby. And out of all the games, it comes from something as insignificant as Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, a somewhat enjoyable but forgettable game. Whenever you first get to the final boss fight, it actually shows some promise. This first phase is actually pretty great by this game's standards. But then Dark Crafter comes along. I was initially pretty excited, but then everything got thrown out the window once the rocket transformation came into play. Something I absolutely despise in video games is whenever they take a gimmick and make it the last part of the final boss fight. And out of all of their picks, they chose the worst form, the rocket transformation. But we haven't even talked about the fight yet, so let's get on to that. So what you gotta do during this fight is collect 100 of those stars so that you can do a special attack to tackle Dark Crafter. Do this 3 times and you win. But while you're doing this, he's constantly shooting spike balls at you. It's annoying to avoid them, since the only way you can avoid them is by changing the direction of the rocket, but it's really difficult to do that since you're constantly propelling forward. That, and it's difficult to accurately deflect the rocket past these things in the first place. Here, I don't think this has enough salt in it yet. Let me rip open this old wound so I can pour some extra salt in there. I was playing this game in multiplayer mode, and in multiplayer mode, the other players don't get to control rockets of their own. Instead, if they mash the buttons on their controller, they can provide a quick boost for the main player. But that just harms them even further because they're getting unexpected bursts of speed, which will bump them into the spikes.
And if you lose your thingy, well, then you're just stuck using your finger.
It's been fun ranting about this boss and all, but I don't know what else can be said, because on top of all that, this boss literally has nothing else to offer. The only redeeming quality about this boss is the music. That's about it. This thing is an absolute joke among everyone in the Kirby fanbase, and I can completely agree with that. I'm Luigi Magic X, and alongside Pyrabit, this is the greatest example of how bad a boss can be if a gimmick is shoved way too far down it. Makes you wonder what my least favorite boss in general is. Well, we'll have to save that for another time. Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone.